So I've been doing some reading recently and learning a lot, like spiritually and about consciousness. Everything is like starting to make sense to me. And reflecting back on specific times in my life when I was younger, when I was in active addiction, when I was getting sober, and now, and some of the mind, like the thought processes and things that I've done just naturally, it all feels like it makes sense and it was for a reason. Like, for example, I've always heard to stay in the present moment, but just that alone wasn't enough for me to like fully understand it. And what I'm learning is that our mind stays in the past and the future. It does not stay in the present moment. It thrives and feeds off of the negative emotions, the fears, the anxieties of the past and the future to try to better prepare you. But if we could take control of the mind and see it as a separate entity, like your mind and your true self are separate entities, and you can take control instead of the mind taking control, because at least for me, my experience with how this makes sense is like your mind can overpower you, and it's a serious like spiritual strength to be able to do the opposite. And we're so programmed and not thinking outside of ourselves, especially in active addiction. I mean, like all we're thinking about is the self pity, the poor me. This is what happened to me. Feel bad for me. At least that was my experience. So understanding that the mind is actually playing tricks on you, and you become hyper vigilant and overreact, overthink, because the mind is in control. So if you're fearing whatever your fears are, it's really just a tactic of the mind to try and get you to not be in the present moment. So if you really try to stay in the present moment and you become an observer of your thoughts and your emotions, you take more control and more power back over them. Because when you're feeling an emotion, it's within the mind and the body. And what I'm learning also is if your mind and your body are conflicting, like your mind says yes, but your heart says no, that's a common thing. Always trust your body, because your mind is going to play tricks on you. Your mind is going to be overreacting, overthinking, staying in the past and staying in the future. So you want to stay in the present moment and observe what you're feeling. And I feel like over the last couple of years, I've done that automatically without learning about it and then taking action. I've really started to realize where I'm at. Am I tired? Am I frustrated? Am I anxious? I become an observer of my thoughts and my emotions. And I explained in my last video about anxiety that I try not to think about tomorrow. I try not to think about yesterday. I literally stay in the present moment and I allow myself to enjoy that moment, because if I spent today worried about tomorrow, I just wasted today. So I don't like to waste time worrying, because 9 times out of 10, when I'm spending so much time worrying, I'm wasting that time and I'll never get that time back. And then it ends up being like not as bad as I thought. And I was like, why did I worry for no reason? So I'm already learning that about myself. And then reading about it is like putting everything together. It's like putting the pieces together. And then another like epiphany that I had was when I was in rehab and I was really struggling with blaming um, blaming my narcissistic father for my problems. And I think a lot of my drinking was around the pain that I felt, and if you have experienced narcissistic abuse from a parent, I also experienced it from in a relationship. So the two on top of each other, it was like I had no experience of what true love is. I had no experience of what how you should be treated is. I've always read Facebook posts at that time, and they didn't make sense. It seemed all like Romeo and Juliet, blah blah, you know, love BS, to be honest with you. And I was like, that's not real because I hadn't experienced it. When I was in rehab and I was at that point in time, somebody told me, well, maybe your dad couldn't be a father to you because he didn't have a dad that was a father to him. And in that moment, like everything just, that was my first spiritual awakening. And it was like all of the pain and all of the problems just lifted from my body. And I started thinking about other people for the very first time and not myself. Not, oh, poor me, not this is what happened to me, feel bad for me, that whole cycle. I was like, okay. And it took a lot because I had a lot of anger and resentment towards my father. But in that moment, I realized, wow, people only do what they know. People only think how they've been taught. And not everybody in this world is going to question everything that they've been taught or been shown. They just are automatic going through life, not ever thinking outside the box or thinking about other people. And it was like for the first time I could think a different way. And being away from alcohol and actually feeling my emotions and being able to sit and actually reflect for the first time, that was a big breakthrough for me. So realizing that people only go through life living the way that they've been taught, like, and I won't get too much into this, but our school system, like, we never learned how to do taxes or real life stuff. Like, if you're never taught, then you don't know. Then it's on you to open your mind and educate yourself or dive deeper. And not everybody does that. So, also, what I learned from a couple videos on YouTube that I've watched actually explains it in a way that was mind blowing to me as well. And it explains the consciousness levels of one dimension, two dimension, three, all the way up to nine. And like the one dimension was like the black hole, dead inside beings, like no no light on them at all. Two dimension was like narcissists, um, people that just feed off of each other. Um, they don't have anything that gives it to them themselves. They got to take from others. The third dimension was the matrix. So that's your 9 to 5 job. That's your structured, perfect life, whatever, following the rules of the government and all that. Fourth dimension is like psychology when you start to think outside the box and you think why people think the way that they do. Um, and then fifth dimension is like, and it progresses. So I'm learning a lot and I'm opening my mind. And this is a constant journey for me. I am constantly reflecting, I'm constantly looking for signs and messages and just learning deeper about ourselves and our souls and how we think and why we think. And I've always been extremely interested in psychology for that reason. It was always my favorite course whenever I took um, classes in high school and college. And I always thrived on that. I feel like even if you're looking outside the box and you're trying to learn more and open your mind, I still feel like we only learn what we're meant to learn when we're meant to learn it. And I'm guilty of this. I never think that I know everything because I absolutely don't. There's no way that I can know everything. Um, but our ego can kind of get in the way and be like, oh, this is the way I've been taught, this is the way I've been shown, this is the way I've always done it, and this is the way to do it. If anybody has, maybe some stubborn grandparents that are stuck in their ways and you're trying to get them to learn technology or something and they're like, no. I kind of relate it to that, but I started my spiritual journey Probably within a year after I got sober, I started learning about tarot and mediumship and the whole crystals thing and everything. And I resonate with a lot, and I leave what I don't, and I don't get too heavy into things. But I like to learn and see what resonates with me. So I started that journey, and I started learning about shadow work and spiritual warfare. Um, I think that was the introduction of, I'm going to just call it consciousness. Um, and then from there, I dove deeper, like into God. And I used to just say the universe. When I was in outpatient rehab, we actually, every day that we went in, we would have to put our sober date, our name, um, and then whatever higher power that we would call, whether it's God, the sun, peace, love. It just couldn't be a doorknob, like a physical object. You couldn't consider a higher power something tangible. So many people would call it different things, and I always called it God because that's what I was taught and that's what I believe in. Um, but then I also interchangeably use the word the universe, because I think it's all a divine orchestration. I think God is the center of it, but I think it's easier for people. Some people grew up in a very strict religion, and they get sober and they don't want to be attached to that. They have their own preconceived notions or experiences with it. So I understand not, calling your higher power God, but it's very interesting. It's very interesting to learn, and that's kind of where I'm at. I truly believe that God is the greatest and is the you know the center of it all. But I also believe that my ancestors and my past loved ones are also a part of the divine orchestration. All my life, I have found pennies, and I think of my grandmother. My grandmother passed away when I was 5 years old, and her and I have a very strong connection. And the way that I looked at it before going to rehab and getting sober and learning about God, I looked at it as if I was talking to her, and then she was relaying the message to God, because I just didn't have that relationship with God yet. So she was kind of my stepping stone to God, is what I would consider it. So whenever I go into meditation, I always picture, it's kind of weird, but I see like a set stage for like a performance, and a dark room with just the lights on the stage, and it's kind of set up like a choir with God as the conductor. And so like on the left would be like my ancestors, my loved ones, my spirit guides, and then on the other side would be like my guardian angels, um, whatever, if you believe in archangels, things like that, those people, and then God is conducting. So it's His will, it's His way, it's His plan, but all of these people up there are helping me specifically, and that's how I look at it. But I'm still on this journey, and I'm still learning, and I just wanted to share some of the things that I've thought about and I've read about recently. And if you have any recommendations of anything that maybe you've read or a video you've watched, drop it in the comments. What's your experience? What's your thoughts? What's your beliefs? If you want to start a discussion, it's interesting to learn from other people. But until the next one, remember to stay kind to yourself. I love you, and I'm so proud of you. I'll see you on the next one.